Hello, beautiful black people. Beautiful black people. Beautiful, beautiful black people. I hope that all is well in your world and this day has progressed very, very well for you and all of your wonderful, wonderful black loved ones. Beautiful, intelligent black people. Know that the wealth, W-E-A-L-T-H, the wealth gap needs to be fixed right here on this plantation called America. The wealth gap needs to be fixed. And the only way to fix that is to give trillions of dollars to the descendants of our enslaved African ancestors. That's the only way to do it. The wealth disparity in America cannot be fixed without giving cash to black folks. We know the stark different economic realities for black and white Americans. In this country, we know about those disparities, and solutions have not yet met those realities. And as long as racist white folks are in charge of the legislature, corporate America, the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. justice system, nothing will ever be done because those white folks, they will stand publicly and say, I do not have a racist bone in my body. Until they do, until the circumstance force them to reveal who they really are. Or someone like Trump, a moron, can come forward and convince millions of these dumbass white folks to support him. And he will encourage them, give them the gall to come out of their closets and show us that they have multiple races, bones in their bodies. This wealth gap must be dealt with. Black folks, black families lag far behind white families in all categories of wealth. More than 73% of white folks, white families, own homes, while only 44% of black families own homes. These medium incomes, the medium income of a white family is more than double that of a black family. White Americans graduate from college at a higher rate than black Americans, which affects black Americans' ability to gain wealth, given that with a college degree, you're more likely to get a better paying job. Black Americans also lag way behind white Americans in savings for retirement and investment in the stock market. When you see all of the lagging statistics between black folks and white folks, you must ask yourself, why? The question must be, the question is, why? It is not, believe you me, my beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters, it is not that white folks are more intelligent. It is not that white folks are morally superior. And it is not that white folks are more industrious than black folks, which are the primary sociological attributes that cause people to succeed in life. That's what these so-called white experts say. Black Americans are very industrious. Black Americans, disproportionately work at some of the toughest and least rewarding jobs in the country. It is not a lack of morality, as black Americans have a deep moral fiber. We always have, and we always will. Black Americans firmly believe in a traditional Judeo-Christian morality and can be more conservative than white folks in many ways. It is certainly not a lack of patriotism in black folks. Black Americans are loyal to this country and have fought in our wars when rights for which we were fighting for others were denied to us right here on this plantation called America. The only obvious conclusion regarding the question of wealth and income disparities is simply white Americans, due to 200 plus years of slavery and systemic racism, had an unjust head start in wealth accumulation, income accumulation, and educational opportunities that were denied to black Americans and are still denied in many ways today in June of 2020. White folks have always had a 20-mile head start in a 26-mile marathon. They have always had a 20-mile head start in a 26-mile marathon. Black folks will never catch up. Black folks will never catch up. It would take 280 years. Black folks will never catch up, my beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters. The only thing left is to admit and acknowledge that the legacy of slavery is the primary factor in the wealth disparities and racial animosity and discrimination. It was slavery that started it all. It is slavery that have affected it all. slavery is like a pandemic that has been passed down through many generations of black folks and white folks. They are not exempt. The system of slavery and its aftermath not only denied black Americans the right to accumulate any kind of wealth, but even more detrimental to the human spirit, it convinced black Americans that they were never intended to be economically and socially equal to white Americans. Black Americans were left to believe that for them, the American dream in a nation founded on capitalism and rule of law was nothing but a hoax. That is what too many black folks still believe today. It is called Stockholm Syndrome, my beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters. So therefore, I am the first to say, I am the first to stand in line and say, reparations, 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 reparations is the cure. Otherwise, we will never, ever catch up. And when I say reparations, I am considering two things. First, that white Americans recognize that reparations is a payment to atone for the largest illegal wealth transfer in this nation's history. And second, for white Americans to understand that the phrase equal justice and economic equality will ring hollow to black Americans until they are made whole, W-H-O-L-E. And the only way to make black Americans whole is to give them cash, reparations, my beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters. Now, how do we do that? How do white folks do that? How do you implement this massive wealth transfer from white folks back to black folks? The only way to do it is to grant black folks the right to damages. The operative word is damages in the form of direct cash payments so that black folks can have the financial assets to achieve economic equality with their white folks counterparts, period, unequivocally. Give the black descendants of those enslaved black folks what they would have had and should have had if their ancestors had not been forced to transfer their wealth to white folks because of the establishment and government maintenance of slavery, Jim Crow, and discriminatory laws for 200 plus years. Admit that, white folks. You have money that you did not earn. You have our money. Give it back. You have our money. Give it back. I put the amount. The amount is around $16 trillion. And if white folks will ask, how did I arrive at that number? And I will admit that it's mostly mathematics with some justifiable assumptions. Basically, the goal of the 16 trillion is to close the wealth gap between black folks and white folks right here on this plantation called America. Right here on this plantation called America. The mathematics goes like this. A typical black American net worth is now about $17,000, while the typical white American net worth is $170,000, which is a tenfold gap. Do the math. You want to close the aforementioned gap in home ownership, 40% versus 70%. You also have to factor in the gap, the income gap, about 25%, the cost of education, the differences in savings and investments. To close all those gaps with payments over 30 years is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 per black American citizen. It is going to be in the neighborhood of $400,000 per black American citizen. Multiply that by the 40 million individuals the 40 million black folks, individuals whose ancestors, black ancestors, were enslaved and transferred all of their wealth to white folks. You do the math and you will arrive at about $16 trillion. There you are. Historically, usually 3 arguments against reparation. The 3 arguments that these racist white folks will make against reparation. The first is why a white person who had nothing to do with the harm caused to people who are now dead and gone should be forced to pay for the damages that they did not commit or have any role in fostering. The answer to that one is that a nation committed the equal treatment of all of its citizens must acknowledge and address the past denial of equal rights and treatment to ensure that the founding principles of that said nation serve to build a unified society and guarantee the social and economic harmony that all of its people need not only survive, but to thrive. That has been the historic justification for all reparations handed down throughout the history of freedom-loving and morally centered people. You don't have many morally centered white folks, period. The second argument that white folks, racist white folks, will make is how to determine who is eligible to receive reparations. My answer to that is straightforward. All living descendants in the United States of once enslaved African Americans, it is impossible to predict the lives of each African American living in the United States would have been different. Had there never been slavery and the resulting systemic racism that followed, therefore, there should be no restrictions or limitations on who is entitled to reparations and how little or how much one has to be harmed. The damages of slavery and discrimination were government endorsed and government enforced. Therefore, if anyone is to blame, everyone is to blame. My beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters, and those white folks that are listening, that is for you too. The last argument against paying black folks reparations for damages is that the taxpayers don't have the money to pay for it. But we already paid for it. We already paid for it, white folks. We already paid for it. We pay for food stamps. We pay for low-income housing. We pay for welfare. All of these government and so-called public assistance programs are tax transfer payments to millions of African Americans and white folks, by the way, whose current economic conditions are directly related to income inequality and the lack of equal opportunities. So, when white folks say we don't have the money, what they are really saying is that they would rather support paternalistic government need-based programs rather than direct cash payments to black folks. That's what these white folks are saying. They would rather support welfare, food stamps, subsidized housing, low-income housing, projects, rather than give direct lump sum payments or direct monthly payments to black folks for about 30 years. I reject the notion. Perhaps some white folks believe that black folks don't know how to manage what would be their own money. I reject that notion unequivocally. Put the money into the hands of black folks and let them decide how they will manage their own financial future. Given money, black Americans would do the exact same thing that white Americans do. They would pay to send their kids to good schools. They would pay to buy nice homes. They would pay to maintain those houses and keep their neighborhoods stable, doing the same thing that those so-called good white folks would do. Beyond that, to pay someone damages is to acknowledge the harm that you caused white folks. Financial damages are a legal atonement, an apology, and a way to make up and a way to make black folks financially equal. Thus, reparations have the twin benefit of offering black folks the nation's atonement, as well as movement toward racial equality in terms of wealth and income. This would also give black folks, black Americans, an opportunity to forgive. And the power of forgiveness in this country can be an amazing savior, both to black Americans and to black Americans' attitudes toward white folks. If you return to black Americans the wealth that was stolen from them by slavery, by Jim Crow, by systemic racism, by institutional racism, etc., etc. I believe that black folks will return to you white folks their faith in what you have come to call American exceptionalism. The question you must answer is whether the American people have the moral fiber today to stand for the principles over which this nation went to war 160 years ago. If I paraphrase it, the words of Abraham Lincoln, this is testing whether this nation or any nation, this is testing whether this nation or any nation so conceived in liberty and so dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal can long endure. You cannot adhere to that. I see that as bullshit until black folks are made whole financially. That's what I have on this one. Please go to thethrasherway.libsyn.com. There you will have access to all that I do. And please download, listen, and download and listen some more. Talk to you again on another one real soon.